So for a few minutes, he's going to share some very interesting experiences from the zone work. Brother Sinclair.
We had the privilege at the end of November and into December to visit some of the branches along the northern part of South America and the islands close by. The first country that we visited was Suriname, which used to be Dutch Guyana. We have a little over 1,000 publishers in that country. Many of the people in Suriname live on rivers back inland, and they call the people down there bush people because they live back in the bush. Well, over the years, some of these people have moved to the capital city in order to gain employment, to earn money. And while in the capital, they have learned the truth because we have congregations there in Paramaribo. And after they learn the truth, then they go back home to share the truth with their relatives and friends. Last year at the district conventions, they had some 100 of these bush people that came on small boats with outboard motors down to the capital city in order to attend the convention. And it took them 2.5 days to make this trip. So it really shows the fine appreciation they have for the truth. The language they speak used to be called Taki-Taki, sort of a pidgin English, but now they call it Sranantonga. And they have a congregation in the capital city that uses that language as well as along the rivers where they speak it. Well, there's a family that includes an 8-year-old boy that attends that congregation, and the little boy has learned to speak that language. So one day when he was out in service, he told his mother he wanted to work with his friend. His friend is 10, and these two boys have already made up their mind they're going to be pioneer partners when they grow up and finish school. So the mother let the two boys work together, but she stayed fairly close. The boys found a woman at the door that spoke this local language, the Sranantonga, and so the young 8-year-old started witnessing to her in her native tongue. And of course she was astounded that this little boy, who wasn't one of the bush people, could speak her language. So he was able to give her a good witness. He found out that she was interested in studying the Bible, and he went and got his mother, brought her back. Arrangements were made for a Bible study. And it turns out that about 15 years ago, this boy's uncle had witnessed to the same woman, and so now as a result of the 8-year-old going from door to door, the woman is studying. This time he's studying with the boy's aunt and making good progress spiritually. Bread is in very short supply in the country. They have it once in a while. And one of the worldly people that lives close by, the missionary sister, came one day and gave her some bread. And the worldly woman says to her, well, I know you're so busy. You're always rushing in and out. She says, I figured you wouldn't have time to stand on line to get bread, so I got the bread for you. But just to show you how much concern the missionaries have for others, when we went from Suriname to our next stop, which was Guyana, the missionaries loaded us up with 6 big loaves of bread to take to the missionaries in Guyana, because in Guyana they have no bread at all. They don't grow wheat, and they do not allow the importation of wheat flour. All they have is rice flour, so they can make little biscuits, but they can't make bread like we're used to. So the missionaries in Suriname sent bread over for the missionaries in Guyana. We have about 1,200 publishers in Guyana, and for quite a few years the work was kind of at a standstill because many had moved away from the country due to the difficult economic situation there. But now the work is progressing very well. And in the last service year, they went from 52 to 102 regular pioneers in the country. They had one sister whose husband is not in the truth, and she has 4 children. She worked as an airline stewardess. And that's a very prestigious job in an economically depressed country, because that means she can go to other countries and she can shop and buy things while she's in the other countries. But she heard a circuit assembly program that really emphasized pioneering, and she began to feel guilty about the fact that she was working secularly. So she talked to her husband, and even though he wasn't in the truth, he encouraged her to quit her job, and he said he would be glad to support her. So she went to her employers and told them she was going to quit. They didn't want her to quit. They even put pressure upon her by saying, well, you won't be able to shop in New York or Miami anymore if you give up being a stewardess. But still, she wanted to quit. They brought her husband down to try to talk him into convincing her to keep her job. But he agreed with his wife, and so she quit. June 1st, she took up the auxiliary pioneer work, and September 1st, she became a regular pioneer. And they said that they're finding more and more of that spirit among the brothers in the country, a willing spirit to expand their ministry, and that certainly is fine to see. The work in Guyana, as we mentioned, has grown with 1,283 publishers. We had a special meeting there one night, and they had over 1,400 at the meeting, just from the capital city alone. So it gives you an idea of the great interest in the work. Our next stop was Trinidad. Trinidad has just completed the building of a new branch. You probably remember reading in your Kingdom Ministry about Trinidad last year. They had 54% of the publishers take up the auxiliary pioneer work in April. And Trinidad is really organized for auxiliary pioneering. In fact, December 1st, one congregation already had 19 publishers signed up for the auxiliary pioneer work for this coming April. They start way ahead of time encouraging the work. We met a blind brother there in one congregation that had over 70 auxiliary pioneers last year. And he said that he shares in the auxiliary pioneer work every April. And he says the reason he prefers to do it in April is because there are so many others doing it that he knows he's not a burden on anybody. He's got many different partners, so he can go out with a different person each day or a couple of different people each day, and nobody has too much difficulty assisting him, even though he's blind. We had a special meeting there, and with about 3,800 publishers in the country, they had over 3,900 at the meeting. We met a little girl, 8 years old, and she introduced us to an 8-year-old boy, a classmate of hers. The little boy's mother studied the truth for a while and stopped, but the boy was very interested, and so he got his parents' permission to go with this girl, this witness girl in his class, to attend the meetings with her and her family. And so he does. He's progressed to the point of becoming a publisher. He wanted his own subscription to the Watchtower, and so he started saving his money. Well, Trinidad money is worth a little less than half of American money, and he had all these 5-cent pieces that he had saved up, and he came to the brother one day that handles subscriptions and handed him all these 5-cent pieces. He had enough to get a Watchtower subscription for himself for 6 months. And the little boy was very happy to be at the meeting. Of course, the girl is happy that she's got a study that's coming along so well that he's publishing along with her. And the little girl witnesses at school. She's placed 10 magazines with other classmates. She has one teacher that was opposed that she placed magazines with, and now the teacher has even promised that she's going to take a subscription. The property that they built the new branch on was a piece of property that the Pentecostals were interested in. And the people in the neighborhood opposed the Pentecostals. A lot of them in that area are Hindus, and they said that they were afraid that there might be stray spirits from the Pentecostals that would disturb them. So they didn't want the Pentecostals there. Well, when the witnesses showed an interest in the property, the brothers decided the best thing to do was to go around the neighborhood and explain to the neighbors what our work was like, what we were interested in the property for. And the neighbors gave absolutely no opposition to Jehovah's Witnesses, and so we have a fine new branch facility there in Trinidad. Our next stop was Venezuela. And Venezuela is a large country. We have 26,000 publishers in Venezuela now. They had a special meeting on a Sunday morning in a stadium, and we had 39,000 at the meeting. That's 150% compared with the publishers. Some traveled up to 12 hours to attend the meeting that didn't even last 2 hours. But to give you an idea of the interest in the country, with 26,000 publishers, they had 93,000 at the last memorial. The work is just booming. They have 41,000 Bible studies being conducted now, and in the last 4 years, their average hours per publisher went from 10.7 to over 13. So they're making fine progress. They're having a lot of interest found in the territory, and they're busy cultivating that interest. They told us about one sister who is a beautician, and she does the hairdressing in her own home. And she has tried witnessing to her customers, but never had much success. But she has a little 4-year-old that she's teaching the truth to. And when the customers come in, the 4-year-old girl goes over to the customers with her My Book of Bible Stories and starts witnessing to the customers and telling them about the stories and showing them the pictures in the book. And the little girl has been able to place 27 My Books with her mother's customers. So the mother's doing a fine job of teaching her youngster, and the youngster is showing a good appreciation for the truth. They told us about an experience that a group of sisters in Caracas had in midweek witnessing. Caracas is a fascinating city. It's filled with high-rise buildings, condominiums, but it's built with hills all over. All around the city there are hills, and squatters build shacks on the hills, and they're just like bumper-to-bumper shacks. Everywhere you look on the hills, you see these shacks. And they're filled with crime. There are poor people that live there, and they are robbing other people in the city and even in their own area. Well, one midweek witnessing group consisted of 10 sisters, and they had never had trouble working among the shacks in the hills, but this particular day, they were held up at gunpoint. And the thief took their wedding rings and their watches. And after the thief left, they continued on in their witnessing. They finished the territory for however long they had planned to stay out. Well, the thief didn't deter them. He didn't stop them from witnessing. And it was very interesting. The next week, when they met for service, it didn't cut down the size of the group, the fact that they had been robbed, but instead of 10 sisters, there were 14 sisters out, including one who had never been out in service before, one new publisher. So it shows that no matter what Satan does to oppose Jehovah's people, it doesn't work. We still continue to serve Jehovah faithfully. Our next stop was Curacao, one of the islands in the Netherlands Antilles, and there the work too is increasing. They have a little over 1,000 publishers. They had 2,100 present for the dedication of a new assembly hall that they have there. A very simple building compared to this. It's basically a large shed with a tin roof, a corrugated roof, and folding chairs in it. But it suits their purpose. The weather is warm, so they don't need something that's closed in. And the brothers there are doing very well. The branch coordinator went there in 1946. When he and his wife went there were 3 publishers on the island, and now there are over 1,000 in that island, over 1,400 in the 3 islands that are under the direction of that branch. There was one woman that studied the Bible down there but wasn't making progress. There were a couple of things that bothered her, and one thing was the society's viewpoint, the Bible viewpoint on drunkenness. She could not see why it was wrong maybe to get drunk on a Saturday night. You weren't working, it didn't interfere with your work, you could sleep it off on Sunday. What was the big problem about getting drunk occasionally? Just social drinking and going overboard. She couldn't see it, and this was a real stumbling block for her in progressing spiritually. And then one day her husband came home rotten drunk. He was so drunk that he smashed the furniture in their home, and he tried to kill his wife and children. Then she saw the point. Then that was no longer a stumbling block. She continued her study and was able to make progress. So it shows that sometimes people need something to hit home to help them to appreciate why Jehovah views things the way he does. From Curacao, we went to Aruba. That's another island in the Netherlands Antilles, and we don't have a branch in Aruba, so we didn't have to meet with the branch committee or the traveling overseers, the missionaries, but we did stop there one night so we could give a talk, and there were 480 publishers, 460 rather, present at the meeting there in Aruba. And the couple that we stayed with that night, the wife told us an interesting experience. A man came to her door one day when her husband wasn't home, and he asked for Fred, and she says, "Well, I'm sorry, Fred is out at work right now." And he says, "Well, some years ago, Fred came and visited me and told me what was going to happen in the future." Of course, Fred was witnessing to him. And he says, "So many of the things that Fred told me have come true." And he says, "I want to know what's going to happen next." And so the sister explained, "Well, we're not fortune tellers, but the Bible tells us what's going to happen next." So she started discussing with him prophecies concerning the last days in the Bible. She was able to place the Live Forever book with him and made arrangements for her husband to call on the man. So because the world conditions are deteriorating, people who have heard the truth in the past are beginning to remember some of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses taught them, and they're showing interest and beginning to turn to Jehovah's Witnesses looking for help. In Aruba, the big problem was that they had no regular pioneers. They had one on the whole island, and the sister died. They had a few auxiliary pioneers, but no regular pioneers. Well, we got good news with the December branch reports. They said that 3 had signed up, turned in applications to take up the regular pioneer work. So it's fine to see that even the spirit of regular pioneering is now catching on there. We'd like to tell you, too, a little bit about Brooklyn. Things are progressing very well at Bethel. We have a couple of factory buildings that the Society purchased not too long ago. 175 Pearl Street, which is across from the 4 large factory buildings that we have. The city has given permit to build a bridge that will connect that factory to one of the others up over a street, and the bridge is going to be 160 feet long and 5 floors above street level. And that will make it possible to move things around inside the buildings without having to take them out on the street, put them on trucks, and transport them around the local streets there where there's a lot of traffic. The other factory building they bought, 360 Furman Street, is being remodeled to some extent. New energy efficient windows are being built and put in by the brothers, and they put in new boilers, and they're going to be moving the shipping department down there because of the tremendous increase in the number of languages and the variety of publications that we have. Shipping needs to expand. The Society is hoping to build a high-rise Bethel home, 35-story building, in the same area as what used to be called the Squibb buildings, where we have our office complex. And if it be Jehovah's will, that will be built too, but right now they're having problems getting permits for that, and an environmental impact survey is being done to see what it would do to the neighborhood. Brothers from around the country have been very generously offering their time. Brothers with special skills in construction and plumbing and other skills have been coming in to work for a week or two, filling out applications and being invited in to work, and they are helping greatly in getting these buildings remodeled for use by the Society. One interesting experience in connection with them involved a pioneer brother who had been working at Bethel for 2 weeks, and he was on his way home, and he had mentioned to the brothers that he would love to come back and volunteer another 2 weeks, but he didn't have the money for the plane fare to make another trip. Well, he and 2 other brothers were traveling together, and when the 3 brothers got to the airport, they found that their flight was overbooked. And so the airline asked for volunteers to get off the flight to go on a later flight, and they said they would if they could go together, if the 3 of them could stay together. Well, they got free round-trip tickets for being willing to wait until a later flight, and they also got $50 given to them in addition. So the brother said that there was no doubt about it. Jehovah answered his prayers. He now had a way to come back to carry on again in sharing and helping with the expansion work at Brooklyn Bethel. So it's a real privilege to be able to serve there at the headquarters of Jehovah's organization. We enjoyed being with our brothers in the 6 countries we visited, and those brothers in those 6 countries asked that their warm love and greetings be given to all the brothers that we met back here in the States, and of course that includes you here at Woodland Hills today. Thank you.
Oh, we certainly appreciate those experiences that Brother Sinclair shared with us.